All right. I'm Joe Turner, and this is the City Manager Unfiltered podcast, a podcast for city managers and other public sector executives. It is the most influential local government podcast in America, and we got a wild episode. We got a lot of ground to cover today, folks. It's just gonna be you and me, no guests. I'm riding solo. Um, Normally, I try to have these episodes recorded in advance, well in advance, and I have a few in the can. But some breaking news today just caused me to change things up a little bit. And so I'm going to have to redo what I kind of did earlier. A little birdie gave me some shocking news about the Clyde, Texas city manager search. I'm baffled. This is a very reliable source, but I still can't believe it. So I'm going to still couch it with leave me some outs in case I'm going to have egg on my face here. I'm just absolutely stunned and floored by what I heard, what's going on in Clyde, Texas tonight. So stay tuned for that. We're going to unpack that a little bit more later in this episode. But come on. The biggest news of all this week has been the utter collapse of Baker Tilly Executive Recruitment. I just can't. I am so happy. I am so happy to watch these guys go out of business. They are the worst. They are the absolute worst recruitment firm in the entire public sector space, and they've tapped out. They're saying no mas. We can't take it anymore. Joe Turner's beating us up too bad. We're losing business. We're hemorrhaging. Our reputation's been tarnished, and we just can't. We can't screw over these city manager candidates anymore without getting criticized. So we're just not going to do it anymore. We're going to take our ball and go home, and we're going to focus on just doing government consulting and private sector consulting, and no more. So I really want to unpack the Baker Tilly situation, take a victory lap. It's really boosted my spirits. As you can tell, I am gleefully happy to see the demise of Baker Tilly, the absolute worst executive recruitment firm in the public sector. We'll unpack that more in a bit. Also on the pod, we are going to talk about Cincinnati, Ohio a little bit. As some of you, I'm sure, are aware, there's been a national news story coming out of Cincinnati related to the assault on some people and the city's response or lack thereof, however you want to define it. We're going to talk about that a little bit. It's kind of surreal since I was literally just in Cincinnati a few weeks ago for the first time, and here it is, a national news story. But I think there's some lessons we can learn about that, and I want to unpack that in a minute. Additionally, yesterday I released my weekly newsletter on LinkedIn, and in there I talked about Austin City Manager TC Broadnax and how he's under fire, under scrutiny for expensing some lunches, some working lunches, and that's drawing some scorn from the local media and some government watchdogs. And I want to talk about that along with a story breaking out of Stanislaus County involving the executive director of their council of governments. They had a grand jury report that also talked about expenses and dinner tabs and lunch tabs and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I think there's some lessons we can learn from that discussion. And so I want to unpack that in a minute. Got some exciting news to put out there for AAME. We're going to be reopening AAME soon, so I want to unpack that in a minute. And so man, there's a lot to get to on this episode. First and foremost, I want to give you guys some personal news, a personal update. As I shared with you a few weeks ago, I've been going through some rough times, obviously mentally and mental health wise, with my personal situation, and it's been a tough slog. And I shared it well with you guys, and kind of put myself out there, and was trying to be real with you guys. And it's been a tough period of time. But I'm happy to report that I'm doing much better. The last couple weeks have been on the uptick ever since I put that episode out. I'm starting to get my momentum back, my mojo back. I got to tell you guys, Baker Tilly getting the shit kicked out of him, announcing that they're going out of business. Man, that was a sight for sore eyes. That was a pick me up of all pick me up. So I'm really excited about that. My phone hasn't lit up that hard since the ICMA executive director Mark Ott announced that he was quote unquote retiring. So yeah, man, I'm super stoked. I'm feeling really good. Starting to get my energy back. Starting to get my momentum back. It's really good right now. So, like I said, I'm doing well. I want to thank everybody who's reached out to me. I had a lot of people reach out privately and say, "Hey, your podcast really resonated with me. I've gone through, or I'm going through something similar." And so I had a lot of people confide with me and share with me their personal stories, and I'm honored and privileged to have been the recipient of those communications. Thank you very much. It means a lot to me to have that level of support and the feedback. So again, thank you, thank you, thank you. A lot of people have been asking me when am I going to reopen the AAME membership portal and let people sign up. And the reality is, for the last several months, I just haven't been myself. I haven't been clicking on all cylinders. And I just haven't wanted to reopen because I just felt like I really wasn't giving enough value, enough of me, and what have you. So um, now that I'm feeling better and getting back into the groove, I'm excited to announce that we're going to be reopening the American Association of Municipal Executives for new members. That's going to be coming up late next week. I'm still working out the final details on that. If you're interested in becoming a member, please join our waitlist. There's going to be a link to it in the show notes. There's also a link on the aame.org website at the bottom of the page. Get on that wait list if you're interested in being a member because I will be providing you with a discount code and just want to reward those who've been patient and expressed interest and just say thank you. So if you want to become a member of the AME, I would highly encourage you to get on that waiting list so that you can be informed about the discount code. I'm really excited about what's going to be coming down the pike in the future with the AME. I already released the City Manager's Guide to Contract Negotiations. That's available for all founding members currently in the AME community. So once you become a member next week or so, you will get access to my guide. It is well over 200 pages in content, plus another 120 some pages with example contracts from our peers across the country that you can use for inspiration and guidance and to learn from. Coming up in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a couple of city managers giving webinars to the aspiring city managers. So if you're aspiring to become a city manager and you want to hear from those who have sat in the seat or sitting in the seat, we're going to be unveiling a regular webinar series where those city managers can impart their wisdom and answer questions and offer guidance to those who are aspiring to be city managers. I really want to tackle some of the issues coming out of Texas with the cap on severance. I think we need to start having some more robust conversations about how we can circumvent or get around these severance caps because that's just not going to work for us. And I think it's going to have a very harmful impact on the profession with respect to the quality and caliber of the talent who's going to want to enter the labor pool or take this job and be running and managing these communities if they're going to be assuming all that risk. I just don't see it being good for the profession as a whole, especially if other states start to copy Texas now that they've followed suit with Illinois and Florida and putting that 20-week cap on. That cap goes into effect in September of this year. And so I would like to start having some conversations inside the AAME community about strategies we can implement, tactics we can use to take care and protect ourselves and our families, right? So I'm really excited about announcing some future webinars on that subject matter in the near future. There are a few other projects and initiatives that are in the pipeline. I'm going to talk about one of those in a bit once we get to the Baker Tilly conversation. So yeah, that'll about do it with my AAME announcement. Like I said, if you're interested in becoming an AAME member, hit that wait list so you can get a discount code and be on the lookout because next within the next 2 weeks it's going to be opening up. Now let's turn our attention to the TC Broadnax situation in Austin and the Stanislaus County Council of Governments executive director out in California. Both of them are facing varying degrees of scrutiny. The Stanislaus County executive director, much more scrutiny than TC Broadnax. But I'm going to start with TC. So TC's making about $488,000 a year to be the Austin city manager. I think he's the highest paid city manager in the entire country. There might be some people who have higher numbers in terms of total compensation due to cashing out vacation leave and whatnot, or lump sum severance payouts and the like. But when it comes to just base annual salary, I'm pretty sure TC is the highest paid city manager in the entire nation. And over his first year, while sitting in the chair, he apparently sought reimbursement for around 150 lunches. Based off the news reports, he's claiming that they were working lunches where food was delivered to the office, and he was under the belief that, or seemed to be informed, or was under the impression that this was a sort of standard operating procedure. That if the executive was working in the office, that the city would basically pick up the lunch tab. The total amount was about $3,800 over the course of the year. Like I said, for around 150 lunches, and he has since reimbursed the city for the $3,800. Now, I'm of two minds of this. Having worked on the political side, I understand the optics of it are terrible, and I would never advise anybody to expense 150 lunches, even if you have legitimate reasons for doing so, or if it's justifiable. I just think you're setting yourself up for the attacks to be leveled against you. And TC's been under attack a little bit because Austin is a very high-profile city, very active. They have some union issues. His fire chief was recently under attack for how they handled or did not handle properly, according to some, the flooding that just recently transpired. And so there's been some issues there. I believe the fire union gave a vote of no confidence on the fire chief, or suggested they had no confidence in him. The city itself is going through a massive budget deficit right now, and they got to balance the budget. It's very easy and it's very silly at the same time to look at $3,800 in lunch reimbursements and act like the sky is falling. And I mentioned it in my newsletter because I wanted to highlight this conversation that we often have in government, about whether or not government should be run more like a business. It is not uncommon for private sector companies to comp lunch, pay for lunch, have lunch brought in and delivered to staff so that they stay in the office and keep on working instead of going out to lunch. Because everyone knows that when you go out to lunch, the hour lunch is probably going to turn to an hour and 10, hour and 20 minutes when you factor in wait times, driving, get in the car, go in the parking garage, especially in an urban environment, these urban metroplexes. Hell, sometimes it could take you 5 to 10 minutes just to get to your car and out of the parking structure before you can even go somewhere to go eat. I can tell you from my personal experience, I've seen my wife's employer pay for her and other staffers to basically have lunch brought in on a near daily basis at times. Again, because they're working long hours, for salaried employees and put in well over 40 hours a week. And the idea is, hey, we'd prefer to have you at the desk working instead of going out. You see it with tech companies left and right, where they'll have the expansive cafeterias and dry cleaners and so forth and so on. We see it with the tech companies, right, up in the Silicon Valley and whatnot, where they'll have on-campus cafeterias for the corporate headquarters. They'll have all different types of amenities that are either comped or subsidized. Again, the idea of keeping them close to their desk because they're getting paid a lot of money. And when you look at TC Broadnax making $488,000 a year, man, the dude's making around $240 an hour. What are we talking about here, right? If we're talking about government being run like a business, would you rather have your city manager who's making $500,000 a year working for 40 minutes while he's, while he's eating that salad that costs $20? Or would you rather him get up and leave and pay for his own salad and not get that work done? And I don't know TC Broadnax. I've never met him. Don't know the man at all, but I'm pretty sure he's working his ass off and he's putting the time in. And I'm pretty sure if you got down to the brass tacks of it, it's more efficient to pay for $20 or $25 to have a salad delivered to him than it is for him to go out and go eat. Now, again, having worked on the political side as an operative, I get it. It's easy pickings. So every city manager listening to this should be very careful about their expenses, especially if you're working in an environment where you have a budget deficit or a budget deficit on the horizon. You have labor unions that are unhappy with you. You have political watchdogs. You're going to get the scrutiny. And whenever the times are tough with the budgeting, again, it's easy pickings for the local media to do public information requests for your expense reports. As much as I disagree with the idea of expensing 150 lunches, having worked in a small town, a completely different environment, even if you're in the right, even if they're legitimate, you're going to be skewered, you're going to be torched, and it's really not worth it. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're making $488,000 a year, do you really want the hassle and the scrutiny and the public scorn and ridicule of that $3,800 expense? Do you really want your governing body to get torched by the local newspapers and local television news outlets and their voters and have to have them chirp in the ear of your council members because their so-called fat cat city manager is living high on the hog because the taxpayers paid for a $20 salad? I don't think you want the hassle. So be smart, obviously, with your expense reports and how you're handling that. And that brings me to Stanislaus County because this situation is just wild. I'm going to play a news clip here for you. It's about 2 minutes long, so you can get the backstory, and then we'll unpack it on the other side.
Well, tonight, the executive director of the Stanislaus Council of Governments is on administrative leave pending an investigation.
Rosa de Leon Park is being accused of spending taxpayer dollars on luxury purchases. KCRA3's Anahita Jafari breaks down why she is now on leave.
The Stanislaus Council of Governments deals with all of the transportation plans in Stanislaus County, a job that requires frequent travel. Rosa de Leon Park, its executive director for more than a decade, is being accused by a civil grand jury of taking advantage of public funds.
For a public employee, it is standard for them to go on administrative leave so that an impartial investigation can be done.
The policy board voted 11-5 at its meeting to place Park on paid leave, receiving her full salary at $25,000 a month.
Because I was one of the 5 that voted no, and I do want to be crystal clear as why I did that. I did not support the paid administrative leave of $25,000 per month for the CEO, which is her monthly salary, so I voted no.
I was one of the dissenting votes of unpaid. I would have rather utilized accrued vacation accruals in lieu of paying for the time off.
Condit was in favor of it.
The allegations that come from the civil grand jury are very troubling, and we want to get to the bottom of it, but we also want to give due process to the executive director.
According to the grand jury report, the executive director drove in luxury rental cars for 3.5 years, totaling more than $100,000. The report also lists more than $33,000 for 39 nights spent at Ritz-Carlton hotels in 5 different cities.
The taxpayer money that comes from the federal government and state of California are intended purposes to be spent, and we need to make sure that those funds are spent on the intended purposes here in Stanislaus County.
Over 7 months, the grand jury found $10,000 worth of purchases with missing receipts. Condit says they have created an ad hoc committee to look into it.
A forensic fiscal audit to check out for the last 5 years of expenditures. We're doing a workplace investigation. We are also incorporating quarterly financial reports on expenditures.
In Stanislaus County, I'm Anahita Jafari, KCRA3 News.
This grand jury report in Stanislaus County, it's not a good look. It's got some pretty sensational findings in it. Just to give you a little flavor, they write the facts: rampant and lavish spending. We're really going to focus on the spending part. There's other aspects of the organization and her leadership that are being reviewed, and it's beyond the scope of this podcast. But according to the grand jury report, this is wild. It says that she rented cars virtually nonstop from mid-2021 to the end of 2024 at a cost of more than $100,000. During this 3.5-year period, there were only 40 days in which the executive director did not have a rental car from the Elk Grove Enterprise rental office. It says that the executive director's rental history shows that more than half of the local rental days from 2018 to 2024 were in the elite, premium, and luxury vehicles such as BMWs and Mercedes-Benzes. I mean, yikes. And when you rent a car from Enterprise, right, they track the mileage, right? So it says that the mileage on these rental cars is greater than what one would expect for travel within the Central Valley. It says that between December 16, 2023 and January 17, 2024, which is obviously a holiday-heavy season, which you wouldn't think there'd be a lot of driving for work, right? It says that in that 1-month period, she drove over 7,000 miles, which is more than the distance of San Francisco to New York City and back. Now, I'm not sure how this happens or what's going on, or if she's just renting vehicles and keeping them past that deadline, because it says other internal Enterprise notes state that the phone calls to the executive director often went unanswered and the voicemail box was full. Emails and texts were also sent. This lack of communication was so significant that Enterprise began the paperwork necessary to repossess the vehicles 4 times. The cars were not repossessed because she finally responded to their many attempts at communication. But can you imagine, like, in what world does an executive director, or could you imagine a city manager renting a car for official business supposedly, and then the rental company has to take action 4 separate times to possibly repossess the vehicle? It gets even, this gets even more wild. It says vehicles rented in California were not returned prior to out of state trips, and some of these trips included a rental car. That means that the executive director was renting two cars at the same time. Between 2022 and 2025, of the 15 trips with rental cars at the destination, there was also a local rental car still out in every circumstance. Worse yet, in one instance, while the executive director was on a foreign cruise, the taxpayers were paying Enterprise for a Volkswagen Atlas Cross Sport for 2 weeks, sitting in a California parking lot, I guess. I don't know, or maybe airport. Oh, man. Now, she was getting $400 a month in a car allowance, but that $400 a month ain't going to cover $100,000 in Mercedes Benz and BMWs getting rented. I mean, it's just crazy. It also talks about spending on flights. Now, there are a couple of heroes in this story, maybe more than two, but in the grand jury report, it talks about one of the policy board members. The policy board is essentially the executive board or the governing body for this organization. It's primarily, I believe, comprised of elected officials from the various cities and agencies that comprise that cog. It says that in one instance, a policy board member was shocked to discover that a first class round trip flight had been purchased on his behalf. The jury was informed that in a closed door office, he loudly confronted the executive director about these purchases, how inappropriate they are, and how inappropriate they look to the taxpayers. He demanded the flights be rebooked as economy class, but it was too late to rebook the flight, so he wrote a personal check to the organization to pay for the flight after verbally warning the executive director to never do it again. Then there's also issues with the executive director having the organization pay for flights for their spouse, allegedly. It says that on February 27, 2024, flights for a Seattle trip were booked for the executive director. The same flights were also booked for the executive director's spouse at a cost of $600 and change. When questioned about these purchases, the director of administrative services stated that the spouse's flights were fraudulent and that the COG was in contact with the credit card company to fight the charges, supposedly. However, the grand jury found that these charges were credited back to the card on January 16th, 2025, nearly a year later, and only after the grand jury investigation had begun. With that said, the next month, the bank reversed the provisional credit charges and the $614 was rebilled to the card. It goes on to talk about multiple trips to the Ritz-Carlton. So there was a total of 39 nights stayed at a Ritz-Carlton at a cost of $33,000. And then it goes on to talk about meals and restaurant expenses where none of the receipts are itemized. It's just a credit card receipt with none of the itemization. So it's impossible to know what the meals were for, who was at, what the meals covered, if alcohol was involved, and so forth and so on. How about this, though? It says that the accounting was so bad, right? The tracking of the receipts was so bad that more than $1,900 over the seven. Now they only looked at a 7 month period for these receipts. It says that there were more than $1,900 over that 7 months in reoccurring charges to scam companies, likely the result of credit card skimming, and they were never challenged with the credit card company. Talks about an Uber ride in euros, I guess, on a personal vacation, yada, yada, yada. It goes on and on and on. The other hero in this story appears to be an executive assistant who was fired after raising questions about these receipts and apparently was dismissed over it. Now, this is pretty egregious stuff, according to the grand jury's findings, and it's pretty excessive and obviously an outlier. But again, you need to be careful with your expenses. Now, let's turn our attention to the city of Cincinnati and the national story that's unfolding there. If you're not familiar with the details, there was a jazz festival about a week ago. And out of that festival, one night, there was video that went super viral featuring two white guys and a white woman being savagely beaten by a group of blacks. And I don't know all the details of it. There's obviously a significant racial component. And I don't want to get into racial politics in America. I want to focus on related aspects of it and things that I think I can help impart be of value to you as a city manager or an assistant city manager, aspiring, etc. And that is the changing landscape and how social media is influencing and shaping the news narrative in America today. Now, I do my best to try to be as impartial and nonpartisan as possible in these conversations, but I also do my best to disclose my biases so that I can be fair to you, the listener. I think many of you might already know that I'm right of center politically. If you do not, I'm stating that for the record. I think I have some insights into the Cincinnati situation, though, that might be helpful. This is not an attempt or a desire to have a conversation about who's right, who's wrong, what's morally justifiable. I don't want to have those kind of conversations. I just want to state what I believe to be the facts and what the dynamics are that are shaping the story. What you need to understand is that the way news is created or sculpted from the right side of the political spectrum has changed significantly in the last few years. Okay. It used to be that Fox News is where the right wing or quote unquote right wing got their news. Okay. If you're not familiar or if you're not aware, Fox News is not respected in a lot of right wing conservative households. And it's also considered more of the boomer neocon sort of area of getting your news. Okay. I don't want to get into all the particulars of why that is. I don't think that's really germane to this discussion. But the fundamental point that you need to understand is that quote unquote right wing Twitter is shaping the news from the right. And what you'll see is that stories that are being watched or followed or trending on X then become stories on Fox News a day or two, a week later. That's just the truth. Mainstream media on the left is dying, right? There's more people attending your budget meeting than are listening to CNN or MSNBC. The ratings are have plummeted. And so Fox News is the largest news network out there, as I'm sure you guys already know that. They get the highest ratings. But what's changed again is that Fox News is now looking at X to get their stories. That's where the content's coming from. And so if you're not familiar with that, then you're late to the game. Okay. I saw the Cincinnati story unfolding in real time ahead of virtually everybody else in the quote unquote mainstream media because one, I don't subscribe to cable and I don't get my news from TV. I don't watch TV. My primary news sources are from X, and I follow various accounts on X, including some of the the larger right wing sort of news personalities or influencers that shape the narrative. Okay, so I saw the Cincinnati situation unfolding virtually in real time. What I will say from a political standpoint is you're very naive if you do not understand that right wing X or right wing Twitter is shaping that news cycle. And right now, what's hot, what's getting engagement, what's getting clicks, what's all that stuff that's going on in social media is a lot of DEI stuff, right? And so Cincinnati, you have a perfect recipe for a story to blow up. You have black on white violence in an urban city where you have a female police chief and you have a black city manager and you have members of the governing body who are minorities. It was super easy to turn the Cincinnati story into a national story just because of the pervasive narratives that are popular right now on the right. And then you have the visceral footage of a woman just getting absolutely crushed. I mean, she gets punched by some dude and the back of her head just thuds against the asphalt. She literally looks like she'd been killed. And then you have instant virality. You have instant virality in the social media age. That thing spread like wildfire through social media and X before Cincinnati even had a chance to respond, and they got caught so flat-footed. So I will say this very clearly. Again, this is not meant to be a political barb, jab, nothing like that. This is I don't care if you're a liberal, if you're a moderate, whatever. That's not the point of this. I'm just telling you from a business standpoint, right? If you're running your organization and your PIOs are not plugged into right-wing X and following what's going on, then they're not doing their job. Period. Now, do I think that every person who's handling a social media account for every organization across the country needs to follow right wing X? No, I don't mean that. But if you're in a larger organization and you have a PIO, a dedicated PIO, that person should be scanning and aware of what's going on because it's not your job to have blinders on and not know what's going on. And the crazy part about social media today is that individuals who live thousands of miles away, who have huge followings, have the ability to nationalize a story in your backyard and blow you up and put you on the map. You do not have the luxury of burying your head in the sand and pretending like those voices don't matter, or whether or not you think they're kooks or they're nuts or they're tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists. It doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. You have to play the game by the rules that exist, not the rules that you want there to be. You don't get to dictate what your reality is. You got to play by the actual reality, and the reality is that you have individuals who use that platform with massive reach. You have individuals on X who are actually shaping the president's agenda. If you do not think that the president listens or follows many of these individuals, or his staff is not giving him reports, you are mistaken. So you cannot be that clueless or that naive to think that you can just ignore it and tune it out. Again, I'm not trying to have a conversation about DEI or racial politics in America or who's right or who's wrong, right? That's not the purpose of what we're talking about here. If you are not following these, dozen or so influencers on the right when a news story happens that impacts your community, then you're not really doing your job and you're failing at your job. And I'm not trying to throw anyone in Cincinnati under the bus or anything like that. I think it's disgusting that Cheryl Long has received threats and harassment. I mean, you got this, she's simply the city manager who's been thrusted into the storm because of this viral social media story. And she has no fault in it. She's not responsible for what a council member said or why the police department didn't respond. It's what your police chief's for, right? Or whatever, right? So, I mean, I think it's sad that you have a city manager who's being attacked. Shout out to the Ohio City County Management Association, the OCMA. They've been doing a great job in the last year and a half or so of standing up for their city managers. It's really the first time I think really that you've seen state associations or national associations stick up for city managers who are going through tough times, and so I think they deserve a lot of kudos for that. But I think it's abhorrent that Cheryl Long is going through this situation and being attacked and vilified. Again, the purpose of me having this conversation is not to assign blame to anybody or anything like that. I'm not, again, this is not a political argument, debate, discussion, nothing like that. I'm not trying to go there. I'm simply trying to articulate how your PIOs, your public information officers, must be dialed in to the core group of influencers on the right if you're managing one of the larger cities in America.
Can we skip to the good part?
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. The good news is that Baker Tilly is no more. They are out of business. They are no longer going to be conducting public sector executive recruitments, and they are no longer going to have the opportunity to screw you over, ignore your emails, or put the Houston skyline on a Dallas executive recruitment brochure. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Baker Tilly is no more. They have set the gold standard for how to crash and burn when it comes to executive recruitment. Who would have thought 2 years ago, nearly 2 years ago to the day, when I published my first episode criticizing Baker Tilly, just a few months after they had purchased Management Partners, the Ohio-based firm that was involved in local government consulting and executive recruitment. They did a massive purchase, a massive roll-up of Management Partners. And here we are 2 years later from that podcast, and about 2.5 years since that purchase, Baker Tilly is leaving. They are exiting the executive recruitment game. And of course, I'm going to take credit. I'm the only person that was out there speaking publicly against Baker Tilly. I was the only person that had the balls to do so, the only person who was dumb enough, insane enough to take the risk and put my name out there in public criticizing one of the largest recruitment firms in the industry. And yeah, it paid off. And I want to talk a little bit more about this whole experience. I never set out to be a critic of Baker Tilly. I never set out to be a hater. I never set out to want to punish them or anything like that. I want to go back and unpack this a little bit for those who may not recall the details. I'd come across an article about the recruitment for the city manager in Canfield, Ohio. And what happened was that Baker Tilly was doing the recruitment for Canfield, but somehow the police chief was heavily involved in the process. And the police chief had basically declared that the finalists did not pass the background check to their liking, thus implying that either the candidate was being deceitful or perhaps revealed something that was not to their liking. Either way, it was not a good look for the candidate. It was not fair to the candidate because the candidate had never been informed throughout the entire process that they were going to be subjected to a lie detector test. Now, this wasn't a classic polygraph test. This was a computerized voice stress analysis test. And I'm not exactly sure the mechanics of it, but I did some research on it. And it's considered very much hocus pocus. It's not considered reliable information. And so there you had a candidate being named the finalist in a city publicly before they were ever informed that a lie detector test was going to be administered. And the recruiter knew about this. The recruiter at the time, Patricia Himanover, she knew that the city was going to subject the candidate to this lie detector test, and it was not disclosed to the candidate. So the candidate gets named a finalist, is on blast, it's out in public, which you all know the consequences of that, right? If the job doesn't go through and if you don't get the position, is that your current governing body could be very upset and annoyed and irritated and scornful that you are applying for another position. So what is a candidate supposed to do when they're declared the finalist and then they're ambushed with the lie detector test? Well, this individual took the lie detector test, and the individuals administering it or getting the results in Canfield apparently did not like the results or whatever. Now, again, I did not set out to go to Ward of Baker Tilly and beat the drum on them or try to drive them out of business. Many of you will not recall this because it's been so long ago. I merely asked for a public apology and a declaration that they would not participate in any other recruitment that would require a lie detector test to be administered to the candidate, the finalist. I think that's a pretty simple request. I think it's a pretty fair request. I sent out multiple voicemail messages to Patricia Himanover, Ann Lewis, and Nancy Hetrick. Multiple voicemails to each of them. Never got a response. I sent multiple emails to them. Never got a response. I tagged Baker Tilly. I believe I sent LinkedIn messages. I can't recall. I didn't go back that far to look. And never got a response. Just looking for an apology. And so they buried their head in the sand. And when I came out and started publicly criticizing Baker Tilly at that Canfield, Ohio podcast and subsequent posts, I was deluged with emails and messages from people who were pissed off and unhappy with their experience with Baker Tilly. It was at that time I knew I'd struck a chord with my peers and colleagues, and people started confiding in me these details, not only about Baker Tilly and other recruiters. But again, I don't have a desire to go to war with every single recruiter out there. That's not my point. That's not my reason for being. I don't want to have any adversarial relationships with a recruiter or recruitment firm. I simply want them to treat candidates with respect and to treat our peers better than they're being treated. You know, I will often hear some of my colleagues say, or some of the commenters on LinkedIn talk about how they are a business and they have to represent their client being the local government agency that's hired them, that's paying the bills. And I totally get that. I totally get that. I really do. But at the same time that I'm being asked to understand that these recruiters work for a client and they have to keep their customer happy, I'm here to remind those recruiters and the recruitment firms that the game has changed since Joe Turner arrived on the scene and since AAME arrived on the scene. You also have to understand then that there's going to be pushback and there's going to be consequences because before you used to operate in a vacuum, unmolested, without any public criticism because nobody wanted to put their name on the dotted line and go out there on a limb and risk their future job prospects by criticizing a recruitment firm. It just didn't happen. There's a flip side to this coin, right? We get to hold the recruitment firms accountable, and there's going to be consequences for poor behavior. And the consequences in the case of Baker Tilly was being driven out of business. Over the last 2 years, there's been a sustained attack highlighting and embarrassing Baker Tilly for its shoddy work product, for its ineptitude, and for its poor treatment of its city manager candidates. And I am not going to lose any sleep or shed one tear over the demise of Baker Tilly. Other recruitment firms and recruiters listening to this podcast should understand that there are consequences for the poor treatment of the candidates, and they will be held accountable. So the answer is very simple. Treat candidates with respect, be transparent, divulge the information that they should be receiving to them. They should be getting key information about the recruitments, about the communities that they're working with, about the governing bodies. They should not be getting sandbagged. Recruiters should not be playing favorites. And if you simply treat these candidates with respect and as professionals, right, treat them like the professionals that they are, then everyone will be happy. But it is incredibly short-sighted on the part of a recruitment firm to treat a candidate poorly, especially since many of these candidates will be responsible for possibly hiring a recruitment firm to do recruitments for either an ACM position, department heads, or other specialized skill sets. That's one. Two, it's just bad. It just sucks. Why are you going to treat candidates poorly? Even though they're not your quote unquote primary client who's paying your bills, they are a secondary client, they're a secondary customer. Recruiters need to fundamentally understand that the candidates help pay their bills too, even if they are not the ones directly sending the checks to them in the mail, right? Or via ACH. Those candidates are helping to pay those bills. They're the ones helping to cash those checks. What I hate most about public sector executive recruitment is that there are no opportunities where candidates can actually vent or voice their frustration about their treatment in a way that one keeps them anonymous and two has any impact of changing or influencing the behavior of these recruitment firms and the recruiters who work for them. There is no mechanism for change or accountability, at least from the perspective of the candidates, right? If you look at the governing body, the agencies that are hiring the recruiters, they do not have any clue or awareness as to the plight of the candidate. It doesn't even register or dawn on them that there are candidates out there who are being mistreated or not treated fairly, or that there are candidates out there that may not even apply for a position that is being recruited by a specific recruitment firm. They're not even aware of the fact that by hiring a certain recruiter, they might be limiting their applicant pool. All they know is that there were some reviews that were, some references that were submitted in the RFP. Maybe the HR director made a few calls to some of the cities in the area or in the region and said, "Oh yeah, we had a good experience with this firm," or whatever. That's all they pretty much know. And when a candidate is successfully placed with that agency, the agency does not care to go back and query the candidates to see how they were treated. They're too busy thinking about moving forward with the next city manager and worrying about their issues. So there's no concern really with getting any feedback, any exit interviews, anything, any surveys, anything like that when it comes to the candidates. And clearly, the candidates can't speak up and voice their frustration or criticism with the recruitment firm because they're afraid of being blackballed or having it held against them on a future recruitment. And except in some of the more egregious instances where a government agency elected officials are not happy with the recruitment firm and they might communicate something and it might bubble up into a news article, outside of that, there is no mechanism in place where even elected officials and HR directors can provide feedback on with respect to their interaction with these recruitment firms. Where does the HR director, where does the governing body go to communicate their concerns or frustrations? They don't. So essentially, recruitment firms can operate with impunity, and there's very little blowback. There's very little threat to them. There are very few consequences. So this entire paradigm needs to shift. It needs to change. There needs to be a fundamental restructuring of how this process works so that candidates have a greater voice. And so when I start looking at Baker Tilly and their demise, I think, wow, that's great. That's awesome. But what now? What's next? What are we going to do in the future to prevent the next firm from becoming the Baker Tilly of the world? Or what are we going to do to encourage the firms that are out there now to perform better? What are we going to do to encourage the existing firms to change their behavior? And so the solution I've come up with is that we need to create a review site for recruitment firms and recruiters. And I'm already in the process. I've already started investing the money to develop this resource. We have a website, a web page that's in development to create a directory whereby candidates can leave a rating and review on recruiters and recruitment firms, and it can be done anonymously so that we can start actually communicating these concerns and start getting it out into the public domain and start to influence or impact the decisions these local governments are making when determining which recruiter they want to hire for their next city manager search. Now, the review or the directory that we're building is only one aspect of this equation. There has to be a holistic approach, right? We want to, at some point, tie in this AAME code of conduct or candidate bill of rights that we've talked about in the past, whereby we have certain expectations, demands, and requirements of these recruitment firms and recruiters. Perhaps we're going to create some sort of seal of approval or stamp of approval. And then there's also a third element where the AAME is going to have to get involved with contacting these local government agencies during the period of time when they're researching and deciding which recruitment firm they're going to use, right? Maybe AAME needs to start contacting these elected officials and HR directors directly to inform them about the directory, inform them about the code of conduct or the candidate bill of rights, inform them where the marketplace is with respect to that recruitment firm's reputation. And I think once we start putting all these pieces together, the recruitment firms will have no choice but to get their act together or face serious consequences. And one thing that I truly think is lacking in this profession, even though we have the professional associations like ICMA, which has been around for over 100 years, you have these state associations. One of the things that I truly want to change about the city management community is our failure to maximize or leverage our collective strength if we decide to work together and move in concert. And that's essentially what we need to do more often when it comes to holding recruitment firms accountable, when it comes to holding vendors accountable for consulting services and for goods and services and so forth and so on, is that we as city managers collectively control billions and billions of dollars in the marketplace. And yet, too often, we are passive players in these situations and we do not take these requisite steps needed to have our voices heard in these processes. So I see this directory and the reviews and ratings that we're going to put together as being the first step in the process of truly forming a collective base of power within the city management community to influence the behavior of businesses and vendors who are directly impacting our lives. In the coming weeks, I'll be sharing more information about this future directory, and I will be soliciting feedback from our peers, our colleagues, about what they'd like to see in that directory, what features, which sort of functionality you'd like to have, what information you'd like to know about these recruitment firms. And if you want to get in touch with me, please send me a LinkedIn message. Please send me a text message or an email. Share your thoughts so I can start incorporating this into the design as we're going forward. But there will be additional time in the future to communicate and weigh in. I'm excited to launch this project in the very near future. I'm hoping to have it out in September. So please do not hesitate to reach out.
Right turn, Clyde.
That's right. Let's talk about Clyde, Texas. We're going to wrap up this podcast episode with some breaking news out of Clyde, Texas. That's located near Abilene. And a little birdie shared with me some information. This person said, hey, you might want to take a look at the Clyde agenda because they've called a special meeting for this evening and they're looking to discuss an interview or hiring of a city manager candidate. I was a little bit confused by this because I know that ClearCurve Professionals, since I have a close relationship with Michael Bays and the firm, I knew that they were doing the recruitment for Clyde because I advertised their recruitments in my newsletter. And the application deadline for Clyde is August 15th. August 15th is 10 days away from right now, this evening. I'm recording this on Tuesday night, trying to get it out before my deadline. This breaking news caused me to reconfigure my podcast episode. And this little birdie shared some shocking news. I was told, and this is a really reliable source, but I have not independently confirmed this. I was told that J.B. Pritchett, the former Lamarck city manager that I've been documenting the city of Lamarck over the last 3 podcast episodes, right, was supposedly going to be hired this evening by the Clyde City Council. Say what? That was my reaction. Say what? How's that possible? This guy was just arrested on 5 charges, including 2 felony counts for arson. Are they really going to be hiring somebody who just got arrested? Again, I believe this information is to be accurate. I have not heard the outcome of the meeting, but I'll be reaching out to Michael Bays first thing in the morning to get an update and figure out what the hell is going on in Clyde. So that's going to do it for me this week. I am Joe Turner. This is the City Manager Unfiltered podcast. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy the content, please make sure you hit that follow, subscribe button on your platform of choice. Please also leave a rating and review on your platform of choice. And if you have any thoughts about that review site for recruiters, please do not hesitate to send me a message so I can get your feedback and thoughts and incorporate it into the design elements of this directory that I'm hoping to have pushed out in September. Catch you next week.